Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Founder and Friends with me, your host, JD, the co-founder and CEO of Raygun. And today I am joined by Patrick Smacchia from NDepend. Did I get that right, Patrick?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Excellent. I was thinking earlier, I was a little bit worried, a Kiwi and a Frenchman walk into a bar and they discuss software quality. So to all our listeners out there, I realize you've now got two accents to juggle, but I can promise you it'll be well worth the listen. So thank you for joining us today. I always like to start this way before we jump into the meat of NDepend and all the cool stuff that you've built for developers. I always like to hear, how'd you get into computers and software development to begin with? Like, where did your passion ignite?
So that's an interesting question because I'm old enough to have started with the 8-bits era in the 80s, and at that time the computer were very not powerful. My first computer was 4K, and
4K.
I liked arcade game. So, but I couldn't afford, of course, an arcade game at home. So I went to play arcade game and try to reproduce on my very small computer, and it was very interesting. Also, my daddy was a programmer at that time, one of the very first programmer. So I got some help from him, some education, and it was a big passion until I found out mathematics, which I like also.
Mm-hmm.
And then after mathematics, I went back to coding.
That's really cool. I feel like I effectively started with a monster computer then, because I started with 8 megabytes of RAM. So 4 kilobytes is pretty tight.
It was science fiction for me. 8 megabytes was like science fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like a few of us that started back a little bit back, really appreciate the performance side of coding still. What can you get out of a machine? Sometimes I see things these days where you've got like 200 megabytes, for a simple program, and I just can't believe it. But
10 megabytes for a flashlight software on a mobile phone. 10 megabytes.
Absolutely. It's absolutely insane. And so over time, obviously, time's moved on. We did get these bigger programming languages, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, having memory management is a pretty good win and things like that. But you and I both clearly ended up finding a pathway to .NET and C# at some stage. How did you sort of discover .NET? What really lured you in and made you think this was a platform you really wanted to spend your time with?
So in the early 2000, like 2000, 2001, I was mostly in C++.
Right.
So, which is a really good way actually to get started with C#.
Yep.
So I was really into C++. I was doing some consulting, some developments, and also I was doing some academics. Then Microsoft arrived with .NET and CLR and stuff like that, and it was really new at that time. It was really small. I mean, even though it was Microsoft, it was really small. And I had this idea that writing a book about .NET would be interesting because it's something new. It looks really big, and it was kind of a bet. And because Microsoft sometime shut down some technology, they didn't shut down .NET, so that's good for us. So I had some talk with a few publishers, and only Aurélie was interested in. And so I read this book, and it was really interesting because writing a book makes you really knowledgeable about the technology, the languages. You have to go in all the details. Then I did a second edition when there were C#2 and generics. It was not a plan, but what I figured out is that the book was very successful, one of the best selling in France. And from there, I've been contacted by big guys like banks and large corp. That was interesting for me to teach .NET to their engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really good period because I went to large corp, maybe 1 or 2 weeks a month, so I can see their code. So I start also consulting. What I figure out is that they kind of all have the same problem.
Yep.
Having code base that start to be bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They were all untangled. I mean, the code, the quality was not there.
Yep.
It was hard. At that time, it was really the early beginning of .NET. There were 0 tool, Yeah, there was FXCOP actually. Yeah, there was FXCOP, which is the ancestor of Roslyn Analyzer. It was really at the beginning. So I had this idea to write a tool, but it was open source. And so I wrote some tools to have a few dependencies, to have a few metrics I found interesting, to have a kind of academic approach to understand software, especially the good usage of abstraction.
Yep.
You know, if you're not abstract, I mean, if you're concrete and everybody use it, like for example, the class string, you're at big risk, because if you change anything, everyone will be broke. Okay. And if you are an abstraction and nobody use it, then you are useless.
Yes.
So from there, you have some graph with 2 dimensions, and you can start to plot some metrics.
Yep. I was just going to set a bit of a scene here for folks that, around 2000 when .NET first came out, which is going back a bit now. And I have had some people critique me for this podcast saying, you talk a lot about stuff from a really long time ago, JD, but I think it sets the scene, which was, C# came along and .NET, and at the time was seen as a little bit of Microsoft's answer to Java, right? And a lot of folks tried to just apply the same things they knew from Java into C#. And I do recall that time there was a lot more chatter about design patterns and how do we even build things with this in an intelligent way. I feel like some of that has actually disappeared a wee bit from the industry, and I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, because it may just be that we now have adopted a style and we know how to approach these problems. But you're exactly right, Patrick, that early on there was a lot of confusion about how do we build these things. We did a lot of 3-layered architecture back then, and ironically, for our listeners, was this morning I actually had my box from Visual Studio 2002 with me, and it had written on the back, .NET enables XML-based web services on the internet. And I was like, boy, how far we've come. I don't know that we would describe it remotely like that these days, but it's a powerful, powerful platform for sure. Now, I kind of cut you off a little bit there because you've done this open source tool. You're just about to get to NDepend, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
Since it was one of the only open source tools,
yep,
and more and more people every year went to .NET, so it started to be kind of successful.
Yep.
I mean, I like the idea of focusing on a tool and to improve it, and to do so, I had to make a living of it. So it became commercial. So the first version was in 2004 April, and it went commercial in February 2007.
Right. That was when I started my first business, by the way, February 2007. So exactly the same time.
That might not be a coincidence, actually. We all progressing at the same pace in the .NET. And when I saw the first sale, I remember Saratoga system, if I can disclose, in the USA. I was like, oh, I sold the license. Crazy.
Yeah. The first one is amazing. You're like, you almost don't believe it, right? You're like, wow, somebody made a mistake.
And since then, so now we are in 2004, it's like 16, 17 years ago. No? So we grew and we relentlessly improved the product. And Microsoft is improving .NET so much, it's like exponential. Like they used to improve it until 2017, and suddenly, bam! Every year, big improvement. Every year. So we follow the technology, which is very interesting because we have the luxury. One of our day-to-day part job is to understand the technology, the new stuff they're doing. It's part of our commitment. So that's really interesting to see it evolving. So we are here. We have a very mature tool used by thousands of companies around the world. And what I like the most is that the future looks promising. I mean, .NET is just keep improving. You see so many developers like, I'm still on Java. I don't like it. I want to go back to C#. I mean, it's after all these years, it's still a shiny platform.
We have a lot of very very successful Java customers at Raygun. So I say this with love, but I still remember the joke from university, which was that if Java had proper garbage collection, Java programs would delete themselves upon execution. But I always thought that was a bit mean. But the first encounter I had with NDepend years ago was actually through the MVP program. So I was an MVP for, I think, about 10 years, and I received a free license, I think, of NDepend. And at the time, we were building an object relational mapper called Lightspeed. And one of our premises for that product was that we really wanted it to be efficient. We wanted it to generate high performance queries and all of that good stuff. But we even cared right down to the lowest level. We wanted the file size to be small, something that who still cares about a DLL size these days? Like nobody really. Yeah. you and I might be the two left, brother.
NDepend is zipped is only 14 megabytes.
All right. Yeah. Well, I remember adjusting like the file alignment settings on the compiler to shave off like an extra 3 kilobytes of our DLL. And I remember at the time we didn't necessarily have a fault that we were trying to solve, but I thought NDepend, it's kind of like this collection of all of these capabilities to analyze and really understand what the heck is going on inside these things. And it was hugely valuable for exploring that. And then fast forward to today. So at Raygun's, grown to the point where I definitely do not write, very much of the code in the product these days, but the team certainly do deep dives into things. And our code base is now quite large. It's I hesitate to call it a legacy code base, but it's sort of, it's a 12-year-old code base in parts now. We've obviously also had the complexity of migrating parts from framework to core. We're just finishing that off. And so I've actually got a different sort of point of view now as well on NDepend, which is, if somebody joins or we are looking at optimizations or large refactorings or we're fighting dependency problems, tools like NDepend now feel like a mech suit, for being able to actually figure it all out. As you say, some tooling improvement has come to Visual Studio and things like Rider. I just haven't seen anything that comes remotely close to the depth that NDepend goes to when you really want to get in and understand the code. So I just wanted to share that a bit with our listeners, of a wee bit of how we use it. We're big on the dependency management these days and understanding everything that's coming in. And like I say, when we had framework and core sort of in the same box, it was particularly messy trying to figure all of that out. So found it super useful there. What's been like, in terms of the customers that you work with, is it more helping on those larger legacy type systems and solving painful problems there?
So I think it can be used in both scenarios. I mean, you start a new project and you want it to be in greenfield, like from the day one, you want it to have high quality. Just a note on this quickly: quality is not just for it's not just a toy. I mean, quality. The idea is to improve the maintainability, to have maintainable code. In the sense that in the future, you won't lose time on all the legacy code you have. Because most of, unfortunately, even these days, a lot of software shops are like that. Like they have huge legacy, and so they cannot add a new feature or fix a bug in full confidence because the code is not really maintainable. They don't have a lot of tests, high coverage. So the key is, if you want to do a software that will hold in time, I mean, that you can improve years after years without having a problem with the growing size of the software, then quality, I think, is very important, especially caring for things like dependency and stuff like that. Because if you don't necessarily, at the end, you end up with spaghetti code, like no one understand, and you cannot refactor. And it has been really interesting when actually everyone is migrating from framework to core, because suddenly they figure out that they have to do a major refactor, and whoa, we get a big ball of mud, and we have to refactor it. And for us, it hasn't been a big problem because we are dog fooding a tool. So that's a priority, of course, for us to use what we give to the community. It's very important to make sure it's efficient. So it hasn't been a big problem. Interestingly enough, most of our code is on the .NET standard because we are still inside Visual Studio. And Visual Studio is still a framework version, so we need to, so like 70% of the code. So despite we like to write and to know about all the new fancy stuff, link improvement and span, structure F, etc., we cannot use it that much because
Right.
most of our code is still on standard. But I promise that the day Microsoft is migrating to core, which I hope as soon as possible,
Yep.
then it will be a big pleasure to do that. So just to come back to your question, so I was talking about the greenfield. So it can make sense for someone that quick and dirty makes sense if you have a startup, you have an idea, you have a short time to market. So just go and see if you can, if it works, if you can make money with your project. So just go for quick and dirty and see if it works. And then after the time, you might have the money to improve back all the quick and dirty code. So it can make sense. But for a large corp that have a large legacy, tool from NDepend can help a lot, both to understand the code in terms of there is a lot of turnover. So they might have a new junior developer, people coming. So you need to understand the code. Also, people proficient on the code base. When it's too large, you just cannot remember everything. So you at a point you need to touch something. So you need to understand how it's engineered.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think you hit an interesting point there too, because there's a lot of debate about, is it good or a bad thing that software developers tend to work 2 to 3 years in a job and then change? And, look, I'm an employer, so people are going to say, well, of course he thinks they should stay a long time. But the reality is I'm not convinced that the developers who only ever do 2 or 3 years at most ever actually really learn how to manage a brownfields project. And so you often end up where the long time folks end up dealing with the people who turn up and just jam in any old random thing and then walk back out the door. So the sense of actual ownership and the care and the quality, I think, kind of all go together. And you're bang on. I will say that the person I know who uses NDepend the most over the years at Raygun, long-term, highest quality, like-minded engineer we have, totally, and
It's a
surprised.
pillar.
Yeah, well, and surprised, he does awesome work all the time, right? Like he does know where a lot of the problems are, and he likes to continually fix them with tools like NDepend. Now, I know we were also going to talk a little bit about this because in brownfields, and for folks that are listening, maybe this is on YouTube, you might want to jump over because we're going to do a little bit of a demo here, because we were chatting before the session about how do you deal with lots of issues versus little. And this is a problem we have at Raygun too, right? If somebody adopts Raygun on the very first day they've built their product, it probably doesn't have a lot of bugs yet because it hasn't been thrashed. It doesn't have a lot of iteration yet. And then we get customers that have very large code bases, maybe lots of users, and it can feel daunting when there's a lot of problems, right? Now, I've seen this in NDepend myself when it kind of goes, hey, here's a lot of things you could go and fix. And so, I was just curious if you've got something you could show us to kind of go, how would somebody actually tackle some of these quality problems?
Okay, so let me show you a solution.
Yep.
So here we are in Visual Studio. We have the solution no commerce. Okay.
Yep.
So that's no commerce. A lot of people knows about it. That's a large ASP.NET Core open source application that you can adjust to your need. So it's a very large application. If we go to the graph, so NDepend is about dependencies, so you can visualize the dependency very well. So we can see there are large projects, okay, because the size is adjusted to the size of the project also. And we can see that they are relying on the center project is definitely this one. So in blue, we can see what it's using.
Yep.
Okay. And in green, we can see what are using it directly. Okay, which project uses it directly. So it's definitely a large application. And if you look at the NDepend dashboard, we can see a few things. So we imported the code coverage. So it's really poorly covered. Actually, we have a visualizer for that. We can see here. Okay, so the cyclomatics. So what's in red is what it's not covered, and what's in green is what is covered. Okay, so it's not there is not many tests So they are in the problem we talked before, like it might be really hard to, maybe you touch something here and you will have some problem here. So yeah, that's our coverage is really important. Unit test is really important. So you can track this kind of metrics with NDepend because you can import it. Okay, so NDepend try to assess the technical debt, the amount of technical debt, which is here almost 24%, which means that if you have to fix every problem NDepend finds, and there are like 47,000 issues, which is a lot. Okay, so if you click it, you can list it, but it's definitely not practicable because there are too many. It will take around 24% the time you spend building the project. Okay, so here we have a problem because nobody has the budget and the time to do this kind of thing. So what's the approach? The approach is that we are using a baseline. Okay, so here the baseline is we see no diff. So here the baseline is the same snapshot that we are looking at. So now imagine we are starting to write code. So I prepare some cool code for you. So I prepare some really dirty code. I have a very dirty method. And I have some base class that is using a derivate class, which is definitely not something good in object-oriented. Okay, so let me uncomment that. Okay, let me rebuild just this project. So now we have a new version of our project that has some problem. Okay, so here you have this little NDepend bubble. I will run a new analysis and also build a report. So NDepend has many facets. This is why there are many, not many, but there are 4 SKU. Okay, for developer, for the guy that want to use it in Visual Studio or side by side with Visual Studio Code or Rider. Okay, and there is also web report generation, which is doing right here.
Yep.
And
So just to be clear there, Patrick, you don't have to use Visual Studio with this, right? So if we've got Rider listeners, there's a standalone desktop app, they can fire that up and still use all the power of NDepend.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, awesome. So here we are. We have the web reports. Okay, so that's interesting because you can, you can put this web report into your CI/CD pipeline. Yep. And see, so you have the dashboard, like the code coverage, the number of issues. Hey, we can see that there is 5 new issues. Okay, so we can gonna have a little bit of look at that. So we go to the issue tab, and we can see that all the new issue. So we have a new issue column, the unresolved issue. So here it's per source file. Okay, so you get coverage, you get amount of debt per source file. Okay, you get the project. And here we can see that hash helper. Okay, I sort it like that. Hash helper has 5 new issues. So I click up. Let's zoom it a bit. And now what kind of issue we can see? We can see that NDepend is doing a diff. Okay, and we can see the new issue. So first we can see base class should not use derivative. Okay, that's with an explanation. Maybe if you're junior, you will like to know about why it's not good. Yep. Okay, so there is a whole explanation of the problem. And then very dirty method just raised 4 new issue. Method too big, too complex. Okay, so definitely it's not a good method. Not commented at all. From now, so this is an interesting rule, which is about regression. So from now, all methods added should respect basic quality principles. Okay, so this ensures that by now, you might have this big legacy with many problems that you know about, but this legacy is in production and it's working. Okay, so by now we're going to focus our effort on the new code and the refactor code. So NDepend can help you with that. And finally, the method is dead because nobody is using it. Okay. Right. So I wanted to do this quick demo. So you have more interesting thing in the report. So we can see per project. So we can see the new issue. They are in NOP core. Okay, same. We get all the metrics. You can see per rules. And here we get a surprise. And this is a worldwide presentation, new feature presentation because it's not already live, but now we're importing with Sharper code inspection. Also, we used to report Rosin analyzer. So now you can report any kind of problem with NDepend. The CQ link rule is the NDepend rule system, which is based on link. Okay.
Nice.
So here it's interesting because you get all the 360 view of the problem of your application. Okay. So of course you can filter. So,
So Ndepend can become the central place for all of your code quality rules, even if you maybe already have a bunch of Roslyn analyzers that you've set up. You can bring it all together in this one place. Now, does Ndepend also support the scenario of being included in the CI/CD pipeline? Because one of the things that I've always felt was the magic elixir of software quality when you get started is to say, treat warnings as errors and break the build. Can I get this integrated directly into the pipeline?
yeah, of course. NDepend is there are only 4 executable, but one of these executable is ndepend.console.exe.
Right.
And you just create a project, and it can also create a project from a solution actually. And from there, you just invoke it in your CI/CD pipeline. We also have an Azure extension. Okay, definitely you can integrate it into your CI/CD pipeline and obtain every day or every hour this kind of reports.
Yep.
And what's interesting is that it will always let you focus on the new issue, on the new problem.
Yep.
Okay. So here I'm still stuck with resharper. So here we can see the rule violated. You can dig in it. Okay. Of course, very dirty method is coming back because it's the problem.
Yep.
So yes, definitely CI/CD is an important thing because that's how people are working right now as a team. And and the thing that is was web all the UI we show here. For now, it's Windows only, and the reason is that there is no consensus on the right framework to use if you want to go multi-platform UI framework. So as long as there is no clear worldwide consensus about which framework we should use, it's hard to migrate out from WPF and WinForm. Seems, I mean, that's another debate, but so we are waiting for that to have the UI available on Linux and macOS, but the report generation can be done on Linux and macOS and Windows. So the NDepend console can run from there.
Yep. We recently did one of these with the folks from Uno platform as well. So that's the one I'm keeping a bit of an eye on for the cross-platform story.
Yeah, Uno is a good candidate, definitely.
Yeah, they do good work. That's really cool though, because I'm glad we did. I think you might be the first person to actually do a demo on one of our founder and friends calls, which means you get bonus, nerd credibility. So well done. What's one of the scenarios? Because I'll give you an example here. When we started Raygun, one of our earliest customers came to me and he said, "This is a great product. I'm not even an engineer, and I found it useful." And that seemed really odd to me because I was thinking, well, it's for programmers, to spot a problem, fix the problem. And it turned out that he was getting he was using Raygun with third-party contractors to say when the error rate has to be at this level in production before we consider it done. And so he was actually not technical, but using it to hold accountability with a third party. And that was just a use case I'd never thought of. And for folks who maybe haven't built a product before or sold a product, this is not unusual to have some pretty weird use cases crop up from people. So I was just curious to ask you, Patrick, what is one of the more odd use cases that you've seen over the years for people using Ndepend?
Odd use cases, I'm not sure what, I mean, the tool can be used for many use cases. Some guys named it the Swiss Army knife in .NET.
Yep.
I mean, there were some people reviewing it, and this term pop up, and I pretty like it because it can help you on many aspects that maybe some other tool can't. So here you can see the dependency stuff. We also have a dependency matrix.
Yep.
Okay. And so
that's the chart I remember. I remember playing with that one way back in the day.
Yeah. You can. This is another approach than the dependency graph, and it can help for some other stuff. But some odd cases, definitely migration was, it's not an odd cases because it's all about dependency. I always thought that dependency is at the core of a software. The architecture, I mean, the architecture of the code, the way the code depends on each other, the way you introduce abstraction, stuff like that. I always thought it's really, really important. It's the primary thing for maintenance. I mean, with unit test, of course, because both are very important. Without surprise, people use NDepend to migrate from a framework to core, because NDepend can spot all the code you're doing. Like, for example, if you're doing abdomen that is not well supported in core anymore, so NDepend can spot this kind of thing. So this one of the usage that just pop out from 2017 when Microsoft introduced core. And NDepend is focused on customization also, so you get a lot of rules.
Yep.
And what's interesting is that the rules are totally open source, and each rule is just a C# link query. Okay.
Yep.
So we just introduce a small header to say one if count, because so it becomes the link query is not just a query but a rule. And so from there, all the rules are open source. So we see a lot of our user doing their own sets of rules. For example, you can generate rule if you don't want this kind of dependency. You can generate a code rule that one if dependency exists. So people like to customize the tool to their own need. They like the default rule, but they like to customize it as well. Yeah, so there is a lot of use case in NDepend if you go to the website actually.
I think that customizability of the rules is a huge win, because, you know, one of the things we do at Raygun is we have our internal development standards. Every company, more or less, has development standards. And I'm a reasonable fan of Jeff Bezos's thinking around mechanisms. You know, how do you try to make something so it default gets, you know, enforced and happens? You know, some people call it the pit of success, or, you know, you try to make it so it works by default. And if you can encode some of those standards as rules into the actual CI/CD pipeline, you know, you're gonna enforce those effectively. So I really like that idea. We've touched a little bit on the fact that we're both people who care a lot about the quality, the performance, the experience in there. And one of the things that's always sort of troubled me is sometimes I'm surprised at how many developers aren't really concerned about that at all. And so I was just curious to sort of ask about your own experience. Like, you clearly have a very strong empathy for the ultimate end user of the software and wanting to make sure you can deliver to them. What sort of, do you think something happened to you that drove that behavior? Was that just you from the way you were born? Like, what's your take on developer and their care for the ultimate end user?
So first, I'm very lucky, because I mean, we are very lucky because the end user is doing the same job as us.
Yep.
So when someone came back to us, we are .NET developer, and so we are .NET developer talking with .NET developer. So we are dogfooding our project also, which is, I think, is an immense chance, and very interesting. Since the early beginning, it's very interesting to see the product scanning itself.
Yep.
Okay. So that makes it a bit different, and to understand how the user went to that conclusion, and what can we do to improve it. And over the year, we really had some very smart people that came to us, and you should do like this, you should do like that. And it was really interesting for us. We learned a lot during the process, actually. Also, we are proposing that makes different compared to some software shop, but for us, the support is free. I mean, as long as you have a license, you have a free support. And we do that because we don't expect a tsunami of support, because over the year we integrate a lot of documentation. We fix the thing that people find odd. We improve. So after all this year, we don't have so much support. We have some, but not so much. So I think when I buy a product and the support is integrated into the license, I think that tells a lot about the product. They don't try to make money like with a $200 per hour support. That's not the way they, I mean, they are on the customer side, they are on the user side. A big point.
I think you had a really important point there. You know, support contracts do lead to a perverse incentive, you know, which is why would you ever try to avoid creating more support, if that's how you make money. And, we've done a few things at Raygun that sometimes are a bit frustrating for the team. Like, for example, one of the engineers on the product, if you have a technical issue, it'll be with them pretty damn quickly. And sometimes the engineers don't like that. But in my mind, the engineer is the only person who can actually fix the problem from reoccurring. So why would you want to have that explained to somebody who can't actually fix the problem? You just want to go straight to the source, get the thing fixed, move forward. So yeah, I was also going to say, there might be, the classic correlation causation question here of NDepend doesn't get a lot of support, but you care a lot about quality. So that might be why.
That goes hand in hand, actually. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
I 100%. I mean, I remember, Raygun these days is a lot larger than our Mindscape business was back in the day. When I first used NDepend, but that ability to fix a bug like in one night and just say to the user, hey, that's now been fixed. That responsiveness, even when you're a smaller organization, I don't care what way you cut it, the end user is happier when they get that type of treatment, right? That speed, that can be not too hard to do if you do have good quality code base, good tests you can rely on, and the team can have a strong sense of security in making changes quickly. So totally support your thinking there. Let's shift gears a little bit here, Patrick. We're sort of nearing our wrapping up, and so we started with the 8-bit computers. We've talked about how you've transformed the quality of .NET code across the industry, and now we're sort of starting to look a little bit further out. So, there's a lot of talk about things like AI. There's, what are we doing at Raygun? What are you doing at NDepend? There's the future of our industry. I just thought we'd open mic this for a little bit on, like, where do you think the software industry is in, say, 5 to 10 years?
Like every of us was very impressed 2 years ago when ChatGPT became mainstream, and suddenly we start to write our code with the help of Copilot or ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big move forward for good, because mostly it's code you could do in 2 hours, and suddenly you do a few requests, and in 10 minutes you have the exact code you wanted with the test also generated. So that becomes to be a big change. I see people on the YouTube, they are generating application to generate some revenue, like just with ChatGPT, even knowing about JavaScript or CSS. So that starts to be interesting. So where we will be in 5 to 10 years, really the improvement looks exponential. So that's hard. That's really hard to time the things. More importantly for us, will people continue to use our tool to have a need for tool like that, or will they just ask an AI to just scan their code and find all the problem? What I believe is that the rules as we have now, rules as a program that executes, will be useful for a long time by now, because they are doing something different than AI. That to me, to what I see on day-to-day basis, AI is very good, but not at that. AI is as a problem to be strict. Okay,
Yep.
like a rule is something very strict. And
Yep.
you know that when you are in this case, then you have this problem. You know that when a base class is using a derived class, then you are breaking the object-oriented, and that's a problem. And AI might find that, but maybe might not find it everywhere, or because of some little glitches in the code, it will say different solution. The strict rule will be there for a long time, I believe.
I would agree with that. When it comes to AI, I'll tell you a little bit of an idea I have, which is, I think AI today is like video streaming on the internet in 1996, which is, it's very expensive. It doesn't work very well, but we all kind of know eventually it will. But it's quite costly and slow right now. And so when we had the internet come along, you go back to the internet tidal wave memo from, say, Bill Gates, and suddenly every software product had to be internet aware, right? It had to be able to play a part. And I think we're starting to see, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but people are talking about new startups as being verticalized AI companies. So, if you built a SaaS for lawyers, you now want to build an AI for lawyers. And I kind of think of it as like, is it really just a case that we need to rethink these tools for the speed of a computer? And what I mean by that is like Raygun, NDepend, I don't know, Team City, Build Kite, Octopus Deploy, everything out there, right? They're kind of designed for the idea that a human is the user in some capacity. But now imagine if the exponential of AI has moved on, and let's say your build server needs to do 3 million builds a day, or it needs to scan the dependency graph after every single code change because it's feeding back into an AI system to kind of course correct. A lot of these things kind of need to move to machine scale, just the same way as we had to take software and make it internet enabled. And to that point, I think there's a lot of code still to write to even enable AI to be able to use some of these tools and benefit from the information they generate. That's just one of my thoughts on it anyway, because I could see NDepend being hugely useful to feed into an AI and then say, cool, now you go and fix it all.
But nevertheless, we are studying, and I'm sure you're studying what can we do.
Yep.
So for tool NDepend, so far we have two paths to get started with the AI. First, we are experimenting with some interesting results about chatting with NDepend.
That's cool.
Hi, this portion of code. I mean, you can, if you know how to use NDepend, you can do everything you want. Okay, so it will be more a tool for beginner that just want to go into some menu and stuff like that. I have to refactor this project. What would be the best approach to do this, to do that? Generate me a graph. Show me the worst code into this project. Write some tests. I mean, stuff like that. So we are experimenting this. We have some confidential beta, and we can see that user are asking a thing we really didn't think about. So that's interesting to see the perimeter of what a user might want. So not everything will be feasible, but that's interesting to see how the user interacts.
It's an interesting point too with AI, is that because even developers, I find, because AI seems a little bit like magic, people seem more comfortable to ask or try things that they might have otherwise discounted as being impossible, because now they think it might be possible. So they at least show you, and you kind of go, oh, that's interesting to see that was what you'd like to try and do. So I think that's been a win. Sorry,
and we are lucky because our users are developers, so they are smart enough to have an understanding of what could be possible or what could not. Because maybe if your users are regular people, maybe they are not engineer minded, and then you might have a lot of surprise.
But maybe. I do think a lot of engineers wrote off AI for all of last year, making the argument that it was just a fancy autocomplete. And I think a lot of engineers are now sitting up and actually have gone and started reading and gone, this is maybe a next level. I think at least I feel like I saw that a wee bit. Like I have a concern that a lot of engineers are going to miss all of the upside of AI because they go, it's not perfect yet. And it's like, well, that's fine, but you should get on the boat and help make it perfect. If you wait until somebody else solves all the problems, you lose the upside. So,
and then the second idea we have for AI integration, but we are definitely not yet there, would be to import some AI finding, because as we saw earlier, NDepend can import all sorts of rules. ReSharper code inspection, Roslyn analyzer, it has in all the rule system. So why not trying to generate some findings from AI with trying to keep the false positive low, the amount of false positive very low, and import it inside NDepend. So there is some format for that, which is named Sarif, static analysis, intelligent format, something like that. That could be interesting. So we have been talking with Microsoft engineer, but they are not yet there. Copilot is not outputting anything into this format. It outputs a lot, but not exactly. But I think it will come because the industry needs this kind of possibility to exchange between applications. And it will be very interesting to see what AI come up with compared to all the rules. Because understand that all rules, so here we have 306 rules So that's a lot, and all of those are only the rules violated. We are not mentioning the one that are not violated. It means that all the guys at NDepend and Microsoft Roslyn and at JetBrains Resharper, we are all thinking about what could be useful to report to the user. Okay, so it's now kind of saturated. It's hard to find a new rule. Okay,
Yes.
and it will be interesting to see in this context what AI come up with. Okay, what kind of problem it will see. I would hope everybody would hope from some nasty bug finding, this kind of bug that are really hard to track, that you cannot really write a rule for this kind of bug because it means that you have to analyze intercall between methods and you are modifying something here and then the bug pop-ups there, this kind of nasty bug. So I hope the AI will be able to find this kind of thing, but we're not yet there, but that's my wish.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because you're right. You kind of almost need a fuzzer to do input-output testing. But then you also occasionally meet that engineer that's probably like a John Carmack that can just look at a bit of code and go, that's wrong. And it's like, cool, how do I make a rule for that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
how to I generalize it to it. So I think by now the rule market, if I can say, is saturated, and
Sure.
AI will bring some new thing. But understand me well, the game is not to have issue just to have issue. It's to really
Yes.
report something that looks important to fix. Definitely, Copilot is not yet there. No,
Yeah.
no ChatGPT, but eventually in the next few years, we'll see this kind of thing appearing.
Yeah. It will certainly be interesting to see where that stuff gets to. I think the Copilot and other things, to what I said earlier around, the reality is it's really costly to run. And, once you have large code bases, you kind of like we have that at Raygun. If we loaded our entire code base and, I don't think there's a context window large enough to fit all of that code in there. So we're not really there yet for mature code bases. I think they're great when you're wanting to kick off small things, you want to get started, build a little demo. They clearly scale well there, but it'll be interesting to see where they get to over the coming years. Hey, Patrick, we're kind of coming up to the end of our time here, and I just wanted to extend a sincere thank you for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. Like I say, I've used NDepend for over 10 years, and so it's just lovely to actually meet you properly in person, have you on the show, and dig a little deeper. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John Daniel, for this discussion. It was a pleasure for me too.
Yep. And thank you to our listeners. We really appreciate you listening in. If there are any questions, we recorded this one not live, but if you have any questions, feel free to email them through. If you have any comments on other guests you'd like us to have on as well, please let us know. Thank you so much for listening.